ויעשה לכל המעשים אני מאמין באמונה שלמה אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שהבורא יתברך שמו שהבורא יתברך שמו לכל הבירואים והוא לבדו עשה ויעשה ויעשה לכל המעשים הוא בורא ומנהיג לכל הבירואים והוא לבדו עשה ויעשה ויעשה לכל המעשים אני מאמין.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Ran out a few seconds early, but that's okay. Hello, my holy sisters and brothers. How are you? That was our dear friend Moshe Storch singing an a cappella version of, I believe, his song, Ani Maamin, I Believe. How are you? Let us light up the darkness. Who's in the house with us today? Well, here we go. Arnold Alban is with us. And I'm just a little bit verklempt here. Hold on a second. There we go. James Roth is with us from Indianapolis. Why is my computer messing me? Okay. Melissa Itel Jurin says, good evening from Great Neck, New York. Leona Sue Thacker says, hello, friends, here from stormy Southern Illinois. Mark Lister says hello. Sam Jacoby is with us from Brooklyn, New York. Gabrielle Flemeister from Nashville. Brandon Christian Sullivan, shalom from Knoxville, Tennessee. Great song. Christo Cheney, hello again from Lubbock, Texas. Oh, it's good to catch a live broadcast again. Stephen Giguere says shalom from Dover, New Hampshire. Back from vacation and all caught up. Ruth Ann Nelson is with us from Colorado. Judy Moyna, just me and my TMT in the Midwest. Jewel Levine, hello from Los Angeles. Mark Lister's with us from Portland, Oregon. Yehudit Sobel says shalom from Florence, South Carolina. Roberta Fast Sidoni from Boynton Beach, Florida. Bill Eldridge says hello from Berkeley. May we squeeze a lemon on Shabbos? Is it just me, or does that sound like a euphemism? That's funny. Ryan Fagan from Minneapolis. Arnold Alban in the house from Northridge, California, waiting all day for this wonderful learning time together. Brandon says it's meant to. Edward Berg is with us from Galloway, New Jersey. Jeff Abramson says shalom. Puck Glass is with us from Fort Worth, Texas. Brandon says the beard is looking good, Sal. Oh, it's scraggly. It's scraggly and it itches. I like the way I look in a beard. I just can't get past the itch. John Shore is with us from Sedona. Rick Davis says good evening from the Chicago area. Philip Presser says Pincus is here from South Florida. Margaret Sapir from Jefferson, Vermont. Amanda Lee Adams, shalom from Virginia. Jeff Abramson says shalom from Council Bluffs, Iowa. Jim Osborne is with us from Lakeland, Florida. Marcella Halfhill says shalom. Joan Valerie is with us from Albany, New York. And Rochelle Rosen says Modesto is in the house. Over on the YouTube side, Neil is with us from Virginia. Deborah Hazelwood from Florida. Lynn from North Texas. Marjorie says shalom from Georgia. Lucy Johnson says shalom from Minnesota. And Lynn says, I have to say that in this daf, which oozing stuff can be eaten and which cannot, got away from me. So let's see if we can clear it up a little bit. This is another one of those dafs with a bunch of different ideas to it. With God's help, we're going to finish our discussion of chapter 21, and we're going to move into chapter 22. So, before I go any further, I just want to mention again, we showed this a couple weeks ago in case you missed it. If you're Jewish and you don't have a mezuzah on your house, we've been partnering with myzuzah.org. That's myzuzah, MYZUZAH. Nina will put the link in the comments, and they will send you a free kosher mezuzah. This is a beautiful kosher scroll inside this good, nicely protecting case. The mezuzah is the scroll inside, not the case, a mistake that's often made. But you do want a case that will protect the scroll if it's going to be outside on the front door of the house. Really, every doorway in the house should have a mezuzah, but certainly the front door. And if you're Jewish and you don't have a mezuzah at all, myzuzah.org will hook you up. So just go to myzuzah.org, and the promo code to get it for free is accidental. Just put in accidental. They will send it to you. The only requirement is that you put it up, you say the blessing, and you take a picture of yourself with the mezuzah and send it to them. A lot of people have taken advantage of this opportunity. If you missed out, now you can do it. But don't take advantage if you're not Jewish. If you're not Jewish, putting a mezuzah on your house is just an adornment. It's not fulfilling an obligation. And if you already have a mezuzah, then save the resource for somebody else who needs it. But I will note that if you already have a mezuzah on your house and you haven't checked it in the last 3.5 years, or at the very least 7 years, then that mezuzah needs checking because the scroll can break down and degrade, and then it needs to be replaced. It will not be giving you the protection that a mezuzah provides. Let me just put that on Do Not Disturb right there. Should have done it before. Okay, so chapter 21. We're going to complete our discussion of chapter 21 with Mishna number 3. Let's talk about cleaning up after a Shabbos meal. This is a question that's going to come up all the time. There's definitely practical ramifications. Now, in the Mishnah, it says that Beis Shammai say, so the followers of the sage Shammai, late Second Temple period, but while the temple was standing, and the followers of Shammai, Beis Shammai, the house of Shammai, are going to disagree with the followers of Hillel, Beis Hillel, the academy of Hillel, right? Beis means the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel. So Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are going to disagree. In the Mishnah, Beis Shammai say we can clear bones and shells after a meal by hand. Beis Hillel says we need to pick up the tablecloth or the table itself and shake off those scraps. Let's unpack that a little bit. I'm going to just give away the punchline here. When we get to the Gemara, there's a few more items to cover in the Mishnah, but when we get to the Gemara, the first thing the sages are going to do, and who is going to do it for us? It's Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman is going to point out almost always Beis Hillel is more lenient than Beis Shammai. Here we have an opinion in this Mishnah where Beis Shammai is more lenient. They say you can clear these items by hand rather than the indirect way where you don't touch the items but you shake them off the table. That's a more stringent opinion. Rav Nachman is going to tell us that somehow the opinions got reversed in the Mishnah, and based on his analysis, comparing this Mishnah to other Mishnayos elsewhere in the Talmud, he's going to determine for us that somehow these two opinions got switched, and in fact, Beis Hillel say you can clear the scraps and bones by hand, and Beis Shammai say don't touch them because they're muktzeh. Pick up the tablecloth or pick up the whole table and shake them off so you don't touch those things. Now, let us clarify. What are we talking about when we say shells and scraps? We're not talking about the food that is left over on your plate because you didn't eat everything that was on your plate. You know, you don't like every item in the salad, you left a little bit of the meat, you didn't eat all your rice, whatever. There's food left on the table. That food, obviously, it's edible, right? It was given to you, it was given to the people on the table. It is edible. the edible scraps of food remain non-muktzeh, right? People can touch them. Obviously, you can move those things. You don't need to touch them with your hands if you don't want to get your fingers soiled, but you can if you need to. The scraps and shells that we're talking about is, for example, you cracked open some walnuts when you were sitting at your Shabbos table. You can do that. You can open them with a nut cracker. You can remove the nuts from the shells. You couldn't remove the nuts from a whole bunch of walnuts, more than you were going to eat at that meal, because then we're getting into food preparation and selecting and other forbidden labors. But if you just took some nuts out of their shells so that you could eat them, okay, that's fine. You ate them. But the shells that you left on the table, they have no use. Animals don't eat those shells. Nobody's going to eat those shells. They are inedible. We separated edible from inedible. This inedible object was created essentially on Shabbos. It was separated from its contents, and now these crack shells, they've come into being as crack shells on Shabbos. No one can eat them. They are muktzeh. So we don't really want to touch them if we can avoid it. This is the whole idea of muktzeh. We don't touch it because it has no permitted use. Now, we don't want them sitting on the table. That's going to take away from our enjoyment of Shabbos. So we want to clear them away. And as we'll see, this is one of the principles of clearing muktzeh from our table. We'd rather not touch it with our hand. Beis Hillel is saying, yeah, you can even touch it with your hand and just get it out of there, perhaps using the rationale that, actually, the ruling is not going to be like, Beis Hillel's ruling is probably this, it's not Shabbos-like to have it on the table, and so we can just remove it under the general idea of things that are repulsive and that impact our enjoyment of Shabbos. But the halacha is not exactly like that. The halacha, according to Shulchan Aruch, is that on Shabbat it is permitted to remove bones fit for dogs and shells fit for use as animal fodder from the table, right? So if the bones or the shells will be eaten by some animal, then you can just pick them up because it's animal fodder. However, if they are not suitable for use as animal fodder, one may only shake the table so they fall off, as per the opinion of Beis Hillel, as is given in the Mishna. Okay, so Rav Nachman says they're reversed, but the fact is that's the law, right? So if an animal can eat it, then we can just pick it up by hand. If not, we're going to shake it off the table. Interestingly, you can pick it up with a utensil because that's considered indirect. Indirect, just to move it off the table and put it somewhere else, like in the trash. And we're going to see a few more principles about how to get trash off the table. Let's keep going. With respect to breadcrumbs, now this is going to come up, it's a special issue. Breadcrumbs, here in the Mishna, they're going to be associated with peas and lentil pods. These are considered insignificant. They're very small, but they are edible. And so you could just move them by hand. However, we're going to distinguish between breadcrumbs and other foods. Bread, this has a very spiritual identity in Judaism for all people. Bread represents, right, our sustenance from the Lord, right? What did we eat for the 40 years in the wilderness? Manna. What was manna? Essentially our daily bread. It wasn't bread, it was this miraculous substance that appeared in the morning between two layers between a layer of dew and a layer of frost, so it was perfectly preserved. But the challah on our Shabbos table, which sits on a challah board with a cover over it, represents the manna in the desert, right? So it's got that layer underneath the challah board and the cover on top. The bread is in between. So our bread really represents all our blessings. The fact that we are alive today and that we have what to eat, and we have a roof over our head, etc. Bread represents our blessings. For that reason, after the meal is over, there's breadcrumbs on the table. I mean, almost always, right? If you're having challah at the meal, challah bread, there's going to end up breadcrumbs on the table. We can gather those crumbs. It is good, it is important, it is, some would say, crucial to treat those crumbs with respect. You have to, this is like an internal state. You have to approach those crumbs with respect. It sounds like, Sal, are you crazy? What are you talking about? I'm telling you, you need to approach the crumbs with respect. Now, if you could gather them and then later feed them to birds or something, beautiful. That's great. If that's not going to be realistic, so then you gather them into some kind of a bag, some kind of a container. As you do it, you're actually thinking about, thank you, God, I have so much that I even have crumbs that I'm not going to have to eat, right? I have so much in my life that I'm not even going to keep these crumbs. I'm going to be throwing them out. But thank you for giving me so much in my life, and I'm not going to be dismissive of these crumbs. I'm not just going to get them out of the way because I'm in a hurry to clean up. I'm going to notice, I'm going to be mindful that I'm gathering these crumbs. I'm going to take them respectfully. I will put them in the garbage, but it's actually better to put them in a bag, some kind of a sealed bag, and then that goes in the garbage. Some people will say, hey, I don't want to waste plastic bags. That's a different issue. But ideally, you would put the breadcrumbs in some kind of like a little baggie, seal the baggie, and put that in the trash, all with an idea of mindfulness. And the Zohar teaches, the foundational text of Jewish mysticism, that if we don't treat our bread respectfully, we will come to lack it, right? So lest we end up poor because we didn't ascribe proper spiritual significance to the bread in our lives, we treat our bread with respect. If it ends up on the floor, we sweep it up respectfully. We don't walk on it. We don't step on it. I don't need to repeat it again, right? We treat bread respectfully, even its crumbs. Moving on. Okay, so with respect to cleaning the table, there's going to be 3 ideas. I mean, the things that you can move with your hand, it's permitted. Don't worry about it. In terms of like, we move the plates away. So now we're going to take the plates and the glasses into the kitchen. If we're going to need those plates or those glasses or that silverware for another meal on Shabbos, let's say we're cleaning out, we're clearing the table Friday night, and we're going to have a lunch on Shabbos, so we're going to need those plates again, then we could wash them. We shouldn't use hot water because we don't want to heat water on Shabbos. So we just use room temperature water. We shouldn't use a regular sponge. Why? Because a sponge, we're concerned that we'll come to squeeze it. If we squeeze a sponge, squeeze the liquid out of a sponge, that's like wringing out. That's part of the dyeing process. That's part of making the tabernacle. It's one of the 39 prohibited labors. So we're going to be very careful not to wipe with something that we're going to come to squeeze the liquid out of. That's why there are Shabbos sponges that are kind of made out of nylon rather than an absorbent material like a sponge, and that's preferred. You can even just do it with your hands, right? Just kind of running it under room temperature water if you need to. Ideally, you've got more dishes, and you have other dishes, and you don't have to clean the first set of dishes. But if you need to clean them for another meal, you do. What you don't do is clean dishes because you're going to use them after Shabbos. We're not going to do anything on Shabbos to prepare for the week. That violates the sanctity and the spirituality of the day. But with respect to objects on the table, which are muktzeh, like these scraps or shells that are not edible by man or beast, they're muktzeh. We don't want to touch them. How are we going to get them off the table? Either we're going to move from the side. This is called tiltul min chatzad, and this is kind of indirect, atypical, moving the muktzeh object. In this case, we might shake out the tablecloth. We might even take it outside to shake out the tablecloth, provided that outside is part of the same private domain. What we don't want to do is take it outside from our private domain into the public domain and dump out the crumbs there or these scraps there to get them off the table, because now we would have violated the prohibition on carrying out from private domain to public domain. Or we might remove them, tiltul begufo, move with the body. This is like if it works for this kind of a situation, maybe we'll move it like with the back of our hands. When we have to touch something, we have to move something, and we can't like shake out the tablecloth. We can't pick up the whole table. So we're going to pick it up in an irregular way with the back of our hand, with an elbow, kicking it with our foot. that kind of thing. The third way to clean scraps off the table is if they're repulsive, and it's just going to be gross to see all these dirty things on the table. It's going to impact our enjoyment of Shabbos. Then we could just pick it up with our hands and get it out, because now the motivation for moving it is different. We covered that, we covered that, we covered that. Okay, that brings us to the end of chapter 21. The summary at the end of each chapter in the Koran Talmud is often a great way to look back at the chapter we've just covered. Usually it's a little bit longer, but this chapter was so short that I'll just read to you Rav Steinsaltz's summary of chapter 21 as we're leaving it. Most of the sages accepted that the halacha, that one is forbidden on Shabbos to handle a base of a forbidden article, right? So if we have something that's muktzeh and it's on top of something that's permitted, the thing that is permitted has now become a base for a muktzeh object, and we can't move it, as we saw. However, this chapter clarified that the rule applies only to moving the item in a normal fashion. When necessary, there is room for leniency with regard to moving such items in an unusual or indirect fashion. Similarly, when there is a need to move something connected to a muktzeh item, such as a child who is holding a muktzeh item like a rock, or a barrel upon which a set aside, a muktzeh item is resting, the sages allowed it and did not apply the prohibition of a base for a forbidden article. It was also explained in this chapter that the halacha, the law, is generally not highly stringent with regard to the laws of muktzeh on Shabbos, and it is permitted to move something in order to protect the honor of Shabbos or to remove an item that people find repulsive. Why would the law be fairly lenient with respect to muktzeh items generally? Because the whole concept of muktzeh is a rabbinic decree, not a Torah law. It's a rabbinic decree to protect us from coming to violate Torah laws, and generally speaking, as a general matter, we're going to be lenient with rabbinic decrees and stringent with Torah laws. And this is especially true according to the view of Rabbi Shimon, which was accepted as normative. That's the end of chapter 21, and now we're going to move into chapter 22 and open our discussion. If you have comments or questions, please put them in the comments. Nina will feed them to me, and I'll get to it at the end. We're going to be there very soon. Chapter 22, we're going to get back into questions of food preparation, and we're going to start specifically with the problem of juice. Juice is a problem on Shabbos. Squeezing juice out of a fruit that is meant for creating juice for drinking. Classic examples are olives and grapes. Those have special status in the land of Israel. It's one of the fruits that Israel is known for, and there are special blessings before and after eating the fruit of the olive or the fruit of the grape, right? If we drink it especially, I mean, the fruit of the grape is wine, of course, and the juice of the grape produces wine. The juice of the olive is olive oil. So while grapes and olives can be eaten as food, we understand they have a very, very important use as the source of a liquid that we drink, right? Olive oil and wine. Likewise, a lemon. We might eat lemon, but generally speaking, we squeeze the juice out of a lemon. We cannot do that on Shabbos. We do not squeeze the juice out of a lemon on Shabbos. This is the general principle here, is that we're taking the edible out of the inedible. So this is a form of threshing, and that's why it is prohibited. The interesting exception about taking juice out of a lemon is that what you can't do is squeeze it into an empty container, an empty vessel, because now you're creating liquid that you could drink later, prohibited on Shabbos. You can't squeeze the lemon into your tea. You can't squeeze lemon juice into a liquid, because that's adding to the liquid that's there. You're drawing liquid out of the fruit. You may, interesting exception to the rule, you may squeeze a little bit of lemon juice onto your solid food. You can squeeze a little bit of lemon onto a piece of salmon. You can squeeze a little bit of lemon onto some guacamole that you're making at that moment. you can do that. Why? Because you're not drawing that food out, the edible out from the inedible in order to drink it. You're actually just transferring some of that food from the lemon to this food as opposed to liquid, whether it be the guacamole or the salmon. Important that you're doing it just because you're going to eat it right then, not in the kitchen because you're preparing and cooking. If you're squeezing juice out of the lemon in the kitchen to sort of finish the dishes, that's going to be a lot more problematic, right? If you're sort of getting it out so that you have an ingredient, very problematic. Definitely, some people like to drink lemon juice in the morning. You cannot do that on Shabbos. But to squeeze a little bit of lemon, just a few drops onto your salmon or into your guacamole, that's going to be part of the exception. Generally speaking, with this juice rules, so we know we can't squeeze an olive to get oil out of it. We can't squeeze a grape to get juice out of it. We can't squeeze the lemon or the orange. What if juice seeps out of the food while we're eating it, right? Let's say we're eating some melon for breakfast on Shabbos morning, and we're eating pieces of melon, right? So melon is something that we don't generally squeeze to get juice out of it. We eat it. We cut it into pieces and eat that fruit. But while we're eating, some juice will seep out of it. Because that fruit was designated for eating, we normally understand it as a food that we eat. That juice that seeped out onto the plate, we could drink that. We could actually just pour that even in a glass and drink that. That would be okay. What about the oil or the grape juice that seeped out while we were cutting olives and grapes on our plate? Juice seeped out of those fruits. Because those fruits are designated at all times as the source of important liquids in our tradition, like olive oil and grape juice, even if it's seeped out incidentally to eating those foods, if it's seeped out on Shabbos, it's prohibited to drink it. We don't drink the juice that incidentally seeps out of olives and grapes, and likewise lemons. Like you're cutting a lemon. You're cutting the lemon, right? And you're cutting a few pieces of lemon that you're going to eat with your salad because you like to do that. And now some lemon juice has pooled in your plate. You can't drink that lemon juice. Why? Because it incidentally seeped out of a fruit that was designated, generally speaking, for drinking. More than we eat those fruits, we drink from them. The intermediate fruits are pomegranates. What was the other one? Pomegranates. It's the fruits that could go one way or the other. One way or the other. Mulberries and pomegranates. So mulberries and pomegranates, sometimes we eat them, sometimes we squeeze them for their juice. If the mulberries and pomegranates and similar fruits that were in your house were designated for eating, you normally think of them as we eat those fruits, then the juice that seeps out of them incidentally while we're eating, it's okay. It wasn't like liquid removed from a juice fruit. But if in your house you keep pomegranates and mulberries because you're going to eventually squeeze them and make juice out of them, then the juice that came out of them on Shabbos, incidentally, we would not drink. That's the way that rule works. And finally, the last part of this Mishna at the opening of chapter 21 that we're going to discuss right now. I just want to make sure there's not something else I want to say. Okay. That if a bunch of fruit, was scattered on the ground of your courtyard, either because I guess it fell out of a basket, there was a whole bunch of fruit on the ground, or maybe you have a fruit tree in your courtyard and a bunch of fruit has fallen from it. So on Shabbos, you wouldn't go through with a basket and pick up all the fruit. That's a little bit too much like gathering, feels like the work of the week. But since they're not attached to a tree anymore, you can't pick fruit off a tree on Shabbos. That's like gleaning, right? That's harvesting. But if it's already on the ground, you could go there and pick up a few that you're going to eat now for your needs at the meal. right? So the philosophy that we're always getting at is Shabbos has to be unlike the rest of the week. We're not going to get involved in projects that feel like the work of the week, but we do definitely want to enjoy Shabbos. So if it's going to help us enjoy Shabbos, to eat some fruit that fell in the courtyard under the fruit tree or because a basket of stuff fell down, we can pick up a few, we can eat them with our meal. We just don't want to get in the project of cleaning up the yard and taking all the fruit from the ground on the yard. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. Let me look at your questions. Okay, Deborah Evans, why is it important that they not be on the table? Can you leave it there for the next day to remove? Absolutely, even better, right? So what I'm saying is you may want to clean the table, especially after a Friday night meal. You might want to clean the table because you're going to have a Shabbos lunch and you want to have a really nice table set for Shabbos lunch. But especially like after Shabbos lunch, you're probably going to, let's say you're going to have your third meal during normal times at the synagogue, or it's just going to be more of a snack later in the day. You don't have to clean up after Shabbos lunch. You don't really have to clean up after Shabbos dinner. Better if you don't. In fact, some of the sages, they would just like leave their shells on the shells from their nuts that they're not going to eat now, or the pits from dates, which are not edible by any animal or person. They'll just kind of throw them in a corner where they're not going to be in anyone's way and just let them be there, and it'll get cleaned up after Shabbos. Much better not to get involved in cleaning projects during Shabbos at all. But what's permitted is to do some light cleaning, just so that, especially for people who wouldn't even feel comfortable if there was a mess on the table, they can do some light cleaning, or they're going to get ready for another Shabbos meal. But if you don't mind that stuff is there, better not to get involved in any cleaning at all. Bill Eldridge, is composting the crumbs in a mindful way acceptable? I don't see why not. I guess my only concern is adding garbage to a compost heap that is going to become fertilizer. Does that change the dynamic from just putting things in the trash? I mean, it seems to me like it's almost more respectful to put the breadcrumbs into a compost heap. It seems to me it's okay, but I would do a little more research on that just to make sure that there's not some kind of an issue like you're adding raw materials to a process that's going to create fertilizer to be used on another day beyond Shabbos. So that would be the concern, and I don't know what the law is on that. Good question. Deborah Evans, could you not treat the bread respectfully by placing it out in the yard for birds or proper decomposition? I think placing in a plastic bag in the trash, though separate, doesn't properly honor God and the earth, right? So people are going to have a concern about adding to plastic in the world. It's a valid concern. It's not one that sort of came up for the sages. They didn't even have plastic baggies, right? So the concept is to be mindful of it. And we know you can't take the crumbs into the public domain. But if you're blessed that you have a yard that's your own property, or you have some flower pots on your own balcony, that kind of thing, and you could put the crumbs there, and birds are going to come and eat it, sounds good to me. I'm not a rabbi. I don't have every law at the tip of my fingers, but it seems okay. That seems okay to me. And definitely, I read today that you can shake out the tablecloth outside, as long as it's in the same domain. So why couldn't you do that with the breadcrumbs? With the breadcrumbs, it's not so much exactly what you do with them, it's how, right? So to have that mindfulness of like, I don't want this to go to waste. I'd rather that God's creatures can enjoy it. Seems to me great, wonderful. Okay, Melissa Iteljurin, is it prohibited on Shabbos to squeeze a ketchup bottle? I've never heard that. I'm thinking. I mean, we're extracting the ketchup from the bottle, but it's meant for that. So it's the fact that it's plastic and it's a squeeze bottle is just the method of getting it out of the vessel. I'm not sure why that would be a problem. That I'm not thinking of anything. If somebody knows a reason not to squeeze ketchup out of a bottle, let me know. I have not heard that one. It seems okay to me, but I'm not sure. Alice Gross, eating an orange while squeezing with your mouth is all right. Yes, because now you're eating it, right? No problem. You can eat any fruit that you want. You just can't squeeze juice. And if juice comes out into your mouth while you're eating, that was a specific exception. No problem. Don't even need to worry about that for sure. Brian of Bloomfield. Is bottled lemon juice okay to add to water? Yes, because it was extracted from the lemon before Shabbos. You can even squeeze lemons before Shabbos, so you have your own container of lemon juice that you made on Friday. You just can't extract it on Shabbos. I knew not to squeeze, but I did not know the distinction between fruit juice, and eating fruit juice. You can absolutely drink fruit juice. You just can't do the squeezing on Shabbos. Caroline Dobson Chavez. If you need an electrolyte replacement, but ran out of tablets, can you squeeze a tablespoon of lemon juice into your water bottle before exercise, or is going for a run not allowed? Right, we talked about this one. Exercising on Shabbos is not going to be allowed. Like a vigorous workout to get all sweaty and to, do a proper workout that's going to increase your fitness. No, we don't do that on Shabbos. You can take a long walk. That's fine. And you can certainly, that's good. You can get quite a bit of fitness out of a long walk. But not a vigorous workout. So squeezing the lemon to create, lemon juice for drinking, that's just not going to work on Shabbos. Do it before Shabbos if you want to have some lemon water when you take a walk. But if you're carrying a bottle while you're taking a long walk, unless you live in a place like LA, which has a really big Erev, and you can go for a long walk and be within the Erev the whole time, carrying that bottle is going to be a problem. And finally, Lynn says, the description of throwing date pits behind the couches made me sorry for the house cleaners. We can't kill bugs on the Sabbath. Doesn't that invite them? I think maybe they were sitting outside. Maybe they were sitting outside in the courtyard. What he was trying to do is create a situation where these repulsive things, these muktzeh items won't be before them while they're sitting and learning Torah for hours and hours after eating and during the eating. But I would think it's either ending up on the ground where in a situation where it won't matter, or perhaps in a courtyard where it won't be, in front of the people who are talking and eating at that time, but it won't create such a problem for the one who cleans up afterward. But good question. Pedro Fotografo, is it okay to peel and cut fruit to eat on Shabbos? Yes, that's okay because that's how you're eating, right? That's how you're eating it. That's the way you'd like to eat it. What you could not do is peel a whole bunch of fruit, because now it's getting to be too much food preparation. Like you wouldn't even want to, people say, hey, why don't we have some fruit? Like you weren't expecting that. And then it was like, oh, we have some fruit. Good idea. And then one person goes in the kitchen and peels fruit for all the guests. That's not going to work. But if you just put the basket of fruit on the table and anybody who wants to eat the fruit can, and some are just going to bite into it and some will cut it and peel it on their plates, that's okay too, because that's just for them to eat at that moment. What about physical therapy exercises? Are those allowed? So when we get into, just like we don't medicate on Shabbos unless we need it, right? Unless life is going to be endangered if we don't medicate. But for like a minor ailment, if you're going to have a migraine headache, you can take let's say the ibuprofen, if that's what you take for a migraine headache, because a migraine is so painful that your pleasure of Shabbos is going to go out the window. But if it's just kind of a minor ache and pain, we try to avoid it and wait till after Shabbos. But if we're on a regimen, like a prescribed regimen, right, where we're working with a doctor or a therapist, you need to eat a certain medicine, or I would think do a certain exercise because you're rehabbing. For example, if you had a knee surgery and you need to do those knee exercises every day, for sure you could do that on Shabbos. Ideally not using an electric machine. I remember when I had my knee surgery, for the first few days, I had a machine, that would like raise and lower my leg and bend it for me. We wouldn't want to do that on Shabbos unless if I didn't do it, like my knee was going to be permanently damaged, like it was going to endanger me. even though it's not life-threatening, but it's going to endanger my physical well-being. So, maybe you want to check with a rabbi on that, but that's the kind of pikuach nefesh exception. Just keeping in mind that we might make the exception, but we're desecrating Shabbos in order to make that exception. So if we can avoid it, we'd rather avoid it. It's just that there are some things that we certainly will desecrate Shabbos for because they're so important to the preservation of both life and well-being, physical being, well-being. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. It's been great to learn with you. With God's help, we'll be together tomorrow for page 144. That's Kuf Mem Dalet. We'll be continuing our discussion of chapter 22 in Tractate Shabbos, the second volume of the Talmud. May you go from strength to strength. May you think about these questions, and may you never lack bread at your table, you and all your loved ones and everyone you care about. And we say amen. All the best.